I'm going to show you how to heal a cavity on your own at home. It's surprisingly straightforward when you understand the process. If your dentist claims they've never witnessed this happening, it's because they haven't applied my approach and techniques. And if you've been told that decay can't be reversed once it reaches the dentin layer, that's simply wrong. I've witnessed it personally, across numerous teeth, and it absolutely does happen. Try it yourself and see the results. What creates a cavity? Before diving into solutions, let's examine what actually causes cavities to develop in your mouth, because they don't just appear overnight. They're not comparable to a blister forming on your foot. Most people are clueless about why cavities form. They assume that once they get a filling, the situation is resolved, and that couldn't be further from the truth. You see, a cavity can only start developing in a tooth that has become weakened. It has lost minerals from its enamel. Tooth enamel resembles a skeleton or framework, similar to a honeycomb filled with minerals occupying all the gaps. The trouble starts when those minerals are lost from those gaps, and they disappear because they get dissolved away from your tooth enamel by any form of acid. This can be acid from foods, from eating habits, from snacking patterns, from numerous sources, including acids generated by bacteria. And that's where everything connects. The start of a cavity, demineralization, and plaque. The initial phase of cavity development starts with what dentistry refers to as demineralization, which means minerals are removed from your teeth's exterior. And when this happens, it creates holes and tiny spaces. And the issue with that is plaque actually penetrates those spaces. What exactly is plaque? It starts with a particular group of bacteria, truly harmful characters in the bacterial realm. And the most notorious of these harmful bacteria is Streptococcus mutans, strep mutans. It's notorious because it metabolizes sugar in your mouth. That's sugar from all varieties of sugars, whether they're natural sugars or sugar from ingredients in cakes and pastries and foods you consume that contain sugar. It can even come from sugars in fruit. Any type of sugar will nourish, even a minuscule amount will nourish, strep mutans. When strep mutans obtains some sugar, it gains energy. While floating in your saliva, strep mutans cannot multiply. But the trouble with strep mutans is when it has energy, it produces little strands of adhesive tendrils, and that enables strep mutans to adhere to your tooth. Once strep mutans has attached to your tooth, it can recruit companions, and it clumps into this mass, which we'll discuss how the plaque develops in another video. But essentially, it grows thicker and more extensive. This massive plaque is reproducing, and as it reproduces, the byproduct is acidity, acids. Can you guess where these acids travel? Into your tooth to trigger more demineralization. The bacteria penetrate that open hole, repeat the same process, trigger more demineralization, penetrate further in, and so it continues. This progressive destructive cycle continues endlessly. The mass of these harmful bacteria, these strep mutans, combined with the acidity and the decayed portion of your tooth, this section of your tooth that's simply being dissolved and collapsing bit by bit initially, consists of just a few of the skeleton structures. And this mass of brownish material is what a dentist will label caries. So caries is actually a type of material composed of the bacteria that triggered it to develop and the damage to the tooth. So it is essentially a type of infection. Progression of a cavity. Now, if this infection persists uninterrupted or uncontrolled, eventually it will compromise the integrity of your tooth, and eventually that tooth will collapse. It no longer has structure to sustain it, and that collapse creates what we call a cavity. So a cavity isn't the infection itself, it isn't caries, it's actually the symptom. It's the final stage of this infection. I believe that's really crucial to distinguish because when we discuss how do you halt a cavity, the optimal time to stop it, of course, is right at the start, long before it collapses. I want to mention here, if you can already see a hole in your tooth, it doesn't mean stop listening. Because even if you have a hole in your tooth, and even if what I explain next isn't going to make that hole vanish, which it probably won't, particularly if it's a massive hole, but what it will accomplish, everything I explain will strengthen the surrounding enamel, which will make any type of filling or crown or any treatment simpler for a dentist. It will clean up and halt this process so it won't penetrate any deeper. It won't keep tunneling closer and closer to the nerve inside your tooth. So you will terminate the disease process and you will harden up the actual caries, this soft, mushy material, once the infection is eliminated. When you apply the techniques that I recommend, that will harden up and be much simpler for the dentist to remove cleanly, completely, and so that it doesn't necessarily cause as much harm to the tooth or even to the nerve inside the tooth. So it's absolutely worthwhile attempting to control a cavity, even if you believe you will eventually need a filling. The myth that exists currently is that once caries penetrates the dentin, you can't halt it. And I will tell you right now, if you follow my instructions, my recommendations, this extends far deeper than the conventional recommendations. And you can and probably will be capable of stopping caries into the dentin, provided it hasn't caused a massive cavity to already have developed. I hope now that's clearer. The distinction between the infection, the caries, and the cavity. How to stop a cavity when it begins. Enamel repair. How do you halt that infection? The first thing we must do is actually restrict sugar. This will restrict plaque from developing in the first place, but that will prevent the future problems. The second thing we must do is actually halt this infection that's already begun in your tooth. The method we do this is to actually help the outer surface of the enamel heal itself. In order to accomplish this, we must stop that acidic damage and we must increase the quantity of minerals that are available for the enamel to repair itself. Enamel isn't living tissue. Enamel is a crystalline structure. And crystals, as you're aware, if you've conducted an experiment at school, you may have cultivated crystals in a petri dish in the lab during your science classes. What happens is that once there's a crystal, it can add to itself provided the liquid surrounding it is at the correct acidity or pH, and that the solution surrounding it is absolutely saturated with minerals. This is where your saliva, the liquid in your mouth, is the miracle solution. Because saliva is flowing, it's super saturated with the exact minerals that your teeth require to repair the outer enamel. So all you really must do, you don't need costly toothpastes and remineralizing solutions or very potent fluoride. All you must do is give your mouth sufficient time to interact with the saliva in your mouth. The problem arises for people who have a saliva flow that is the incorrect pH, or people who have a dry mouth. Perhaps you've had your salivary glands removed, or you have a condition, or you're taking medications that dry it up. This is where xylitol becomes your ally. Xylitol, whatever your challenges are, will stimulate a flow of mineral-rich saliva that spit in your mouth, and it will enter your mouth at the right pH and full of these minerals to repair this outer casing or coating on the surface of your teeth. You can accelerate this process of mineralization for sure. And the method you do that is using the right type of fluoridated toothpaste and mouth rinses. I am very, very particular about the only type of fluoride I recommend, which is sodium fluoride, and the rinses that I recommend are a 0.05%, very, very dilute, very, very minimal. You may hear dentists wanting to prescribe for you some type of really potent fluoride. I highly recommend attempting the more dilute first because it appears to be far more effective when you use it 2 or 3 times a day. Twice a day should work really well. What the fluoride is actually doing is it's accelerating this remineralization process. We know in a child's tooth, as it emerges into the mouth, it has no minerals, and it takes a year, 12 months for that mineralization. It's called maturation to happen. This is why a child's tooth entering the mouth always appears yellow, always appears darker, it's really soft, they decay really easily. When we mineralize them with these same techniques of not eating and drinking between meals, giving your saliva time to mineralize, we can accelerate a year, which is what it normally takes, to 3 months simply by rinsing twice a day with a dilute 0.05% sodium fluoride mouth rinse. If you're attempting to make this outer casing of your tooth harden and firm itself up, I absolutely recommend using mouth rinses that I recommend because you'll reduce the time interval. If you're going back to the dentist, I would allow yourself about 3 to 4 months to have mineralized superficial decay. Anything that's just in the enamel should disappear in 3 or 4 months. Reverse a cavity. If it has progressed further into dentin, if it's deeper into the dentin, that's what we're going to discuss next. If you have decay that extends into the dentin, it means there are bacteria deeper within your tooth. Most dentists will say fluoride doesn't work. What they've observed is what I've observed 2 years ago. The fluoride and the mineralization would happen everywhere except a tiny little hole in the surface. That little tiny hole was basically a feeding tube for the bacteria inside the tooth. They were drawing in the sugars and the liquids from your mouth so they could continue to survive and grow and damage your tooth inside. So we have to get that little hole, that feeding tube, to seal up. That's when we eliminate these inside deeper bacteria, and we can only do that. It's actually the reverse way around. We have to eliminate the bacteria so that the hole can seal completely, the surface of the enamel is completely healed, and then the internal mineralization can happen. If you follow my instructions, my recommendations, you can and probably will be capable of stopping caries into the dentin, provided it hasn't caused a massive cavity to already have developed. You can do this quite easily by using the products that I recommend as part of my complete mouth care system. These other mouth rinses that we combine with the xylitol, with the dilute fluoride. These other mouth rinses target other bacteria, ones that are deeper within the tooth, and they will then halt this little hole in the surface of the enamel. When that enamel is complete and a complete barrier, there'll be no nourishment for the internal bacteria. They will die. Then the internal mechanisms of the tooth will take over. The odontoblast has its body right in the center of your tooth, but its arm floats in liquids inside this channel, or tubule as it's called, that runs through the main part of the tooth. There are two ways minerals can come to mineralize this now empty void that was caused by the caries or this infection process. The minerals either come from the lymphatic liquids, which are in connection with your body liquids, and this is where diet, nutrition, circulation, perhaps taking a supplement, all these things can help your body heal this internal place. The other thing that happens is that the odontoblast cell has the capability of secreting new dentin to actually block the end of the tubule, to construct a barrier to stop these disease plaque carious bacteria from attacking the center of the tooth. It's a natural defense mechanism. The reason it doesn't function very well most of the time is that the type of assault of our modern diets is so rapid and so aggressive, the poor little odontoblast doesn't stand a chance. But when we give it time, when we eliminate the disease food, then we give the odontoblast time to do its repair and its remineralization of the interior of the tooth. This process can take up to 1 or 2 years to happen. What do? Go back to the dentist, see what they say. If they believe that your mouth health has dramatically improved, maybe you could request to try longer before they fill what they might see on an x-ray as a cavity. You can ask your dentist how much time they would give you. The longer you can extend the time, the more they should be able to see on x-ray. First of all, the enamel healing within 3 or 4 months. Maybe if you go back for an annual visit, 13 to 14 months later, they should be able to see on x-ray minerals occurring, a remineralization of this area. I always gave my patients the first 3 months before we ever filled a cavity, unless it was an emergency so that we could see what could heal itself. You will need to discuss with your dentist what is safe, where you are traveling, what's happening. Is this tooth a problem? Is it a food trap? But at home by yourself, if you want to do these things, you can make an incredible change to a cavity and potentially completely reverse it within a year. Nothing surpasses a pristine tooth for strength, for beauty, for longevity, for causing you no more problems. And you will have learned how to mineralize your teeth, not just that tooth, your entire mouth. I believe there are so many arguments for why it's worth giving time, attempt to reverse this cavity at home.